Imagine waking up one morning to find the sky darkened by a thick blanket of ash. The air is heavy, difficult to breathe, and the sun is nothing but a faint, reddish glow behind a shroud of darkness. Streets that were once bustling with life are now eerily quiet, coated in a layer of ash. Crops that once grew tall and green have withered, their growth stunted by the lack of sunlight. Cities that were once thriving are buried under tons of volcanic debris. This isn't a scene from a disaster movie, it's history repeating itself. Italy is on the brink of a catastrophic volcanic eruption, and the clock is ticking. What would you do if you knew your life could change forever tomorrow? This scenario is not just a terrifying thought experiment, it's a reality that has played out in history and one that could very well happen again. The threat is real, and the stakes are higher than ever. As we delve into this unfolding disaster, we'll explore how past eruptions have shaped our world, how current geological signs are pointing toward another major event, and what could happen if the worst-case scenario unfolds. Today, we're taking you on a deep dive into a looming disaster that could not only devastate Italy but impact the entire world. The subject is so critical that understanding it could mean the difference between preparedness and chaos, between life and death. In the next few minutes, you'll learn about the looming threat of massive volcanic eruptions in Italy, the science behind it, and the global consequences we could face if action isn't taken immediately. We'll explore the historical precedents that warn us of what's coming, the current geological activity that has scientists on high alert, the Italian government's controversial response, and the potential global impact of such an event. This isn't just about Italy. It's about all of us. 39,000 years ago, Italy was the epicenter of one of the most catastrophic volcanic eruptions in history. This event, known as the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption, was so powerful that it sent Europe into a volcanic winter, leading to the extinction of the Neanderthals. But what exactly happened during this ancient eruption, and why should we care about it today? To understand the severity of the Campanian Ignimbrite eruption, imagine an explosion so vast that it spewed out 300 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere. The skies darkened as ash spread across Europe, blocking out sunlight and plunging the continent into a deep, prolonged winter. The temperature dropped by several degrees, a change that may seem small but had devastating effects on the environment. Crops failed, and food became scarce. The once lush and fertile lands of Europe turned barren and inhospitable. The eruption's effects were not confined to Italy. Ash from the eruption has been found as far away as Russia, indicating the global reach of the disaster. The eruption also caused massive die-offs in plants and animals, which in turn led to the extinction of the Neanderthals, who were already struggling to survive in the harsh conditions of the time. The eruption likely tipped the balance, making it impossible for them to continue their existence on Earth. But the story of Italy's volcanic past doesn't end there. Fast forward to 79 AD, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying the Roman cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under meters of volcanic ash and pumice. The eruption happened with little warning, catching the inhabitants by surprise. Within hours, the cities were destroyed, and thousands of lives were lost. The bodies of the victims, preserved by the ash, tell a story of panic and despair as people tried in vain to escape the disaster. Today, the ruins of Pompeii serve as a stark reminder of the destructive power of volcanic eruptions. But what if I told you that the same region is showing signs of erupting again, and this time, the consequences could be even more devastating? Italy's history of volcanic activity is not just a thing of the past, it's a very real and present danger. Today, Italy sits on a ticking time bomb of volcanic activity. With 24 separate volcanoes showing dangerous signs of awakening, the ground is literally shaking beneath the feet of millions. The recent surge in earthquakes is a clear signal that something catastrophic is brewing beneath the surface. But what does this mean for the people living in these regions, and what could happen if these volcanoes erupt? To fully grasp the current threat, let's start with a closer look at some of Italy's most dangerous volcanoes. Mount Vesuvius, Mount Etna, and the Phlegraean Fields are all part of a volatile geological landscape that could erupt at any moment. Mount Vesuvius, located near Naples, is perhaps the most famous of Italy's volcanoes, largely due to its catastrophic eruption in 79 AD. Today, it remains one of the most closely monitored volcanoes in the world. Scientists have detected increasing levels of seismic activity around Vesuvius, including frequent tremors and gas emissions. These are telltale signs that the magma chamber beneath the volcano is filling up, potentially leading to another major eruption. But Vesuvius is not the only threat. Mount Etna, located in Sicily, is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. It has been erupting almost continuously for the past few decades, and its activity has been increasing in recent years. In February 2021, Etna produced a series of spectacular eruptions that sent lava fountains shooting into the sky and caused ash to rain down on nearby villages. While these eruptions were not large enough to cause significant damage, they serve as a reminder of the constant threat posed by Etna. Perhaps the most concerning of all is the Phlegraean Fields, a supervolcano located just west of Naples. Unlike Vesuvius and Etna, the Phlegraean Fields do not have a single volcanic cone but are instead a vast caldera, a large, bowl-shaped depression formed by the collapse of land following a volcanic eruption. The Phlegraean Fields are home to several smaller craters and geothermal features, such as fumaroles and hot springs. The last eruption of the Phlegraean Fields occurred in 1538, but recent studies have shown that the caldera is becoming increasingly active. Scientists have observed ground uplift in the area, a phenomenon caused by the movement of magma beneath the surface. This uplift, combined with an increase in seismic activity, suggests that the Phlegraean Fields could be gearing up for another eruption. And because the caldera is so large, an eruption here could have devastating consequences, not just for Italy but for the entire world. Consider what happened in 2010 when the Eyjafjallajökull volcano in Iceland erupted. Although the eruption was relatively small, it released a massive ash cloud that spread across Europe, grounding flights and causing travel chaos for millions of people. Now imagine an eruption on the scale of the Phlegraean Fields, an event that could release hundreds of times more ash into the atmosphere. The impact on global air travel, agriculture, and the climate could be catastrophic. And it's not just about the ash. Volcanic eruptions can also trigger tsunamis, especially when they occur near the coast. The collapse of part of a volcano into the sea can displace a large volume of water, generating massive waves that can travel across entire ocean basins. This was the case in 1883 when the eruption of Krakatau in Indonesia caused a series of tsunamis that killed more than 36,000 people. With many of Italy's volcanoes located near the coast, the threat of a tsunami is very real. In recent months, the ground beneath Italy has been shaking more frequently. Earthquakes, often precursors to volcanic eruptions, have been increasing in both frequency and intensity. In July 2024, a series of tremors rattled Naples, leaving residents and tourists in a state of panic. Buildings swayed, and people ran into the streets, fearing that the next big one could be the start of a major eruption. Scientists warn that these are not isolated incidents but rather signs that something much larger and more dangerous is brewing beneath the surface. So, what happens if one or more of these volcanoes erupts? The immediate effects would be devastating for the local population. Lava flows, pyroclastic surges, and ashfall would destroy everything in their path. Entire towns and cities could be buried under meters of volcanic material. The air would become toxic, filled with sulfur dioxide and other harmful gases. But the impact would not be confined to Italy. The eruption could send a plume of ash high into the atmosphere, where it would be carried by the winds across Europe and beyond. This ash would block out sunlight, leading to a drop in temperatures and a phenomenon known as volcanic winter. Crops would fail, leading to food shortages and skyrocketing prices. The global economy, already fragile, could be pushed to the brink of collapse. The psychological impact would also be significant. The constant threat of another eruption would create a climate of fear and uncertainty, as people wonder if their homes, their lives, and their futures could be wiped out in an instant. Despite the growing threat, the Italian government's response has been a mix of warnings and contradictions. On one hand, authorities are imposing construction bans and advising caution in high-risk areas. On the other hand, billions are being poured into redevelopment projects in these same areas, encouraging people to stay where they could be in the path of destruction. It's a dangerous game of Russian roulette, with the lives of millions hanging in the balance. But why is the government taking such a contradictory approach, And what does this mean for the people who live in these regions? To understand the government's response, we need to look at the complex relationship between Italy's economy, its history, and its people. Italy is a country with a rich cultural heritage, and many of its most iconic cities, Naples, Rome, Florence, are located in areas at risk of volcanic activity. These cities are not only cultural treasures but also economic powerhouses, generating billions of euros each year through tourism, industry, and commerce. Evacuating these cities, or even imposing strict building regulations, would have a significant economic impact. It would mean relocating millions of people, closing down businesses, and potentially losing billions in revenue. For a country already struggling with economic challenges, this is a difficult pill to swallow. At the same time, there is a deep cultural attachment to these places. Many Italians have lived in these regions for generations, and the thought of leaving behind their homes, their families, and their way of life is unthinkable. This cultural attachment is reflected in the government's approach, which often prioritizes economic and cultural preservation over safety. Consider the example of Naples. This city, located just a few kilometers from Mount Vesuvius, is one of the most densely populated areas in Europe. It is also one of Italy's most economically important cities, with a thriving port, a booming tourism industry, and a rich cultural heritage. The Italian government has invested heavily in Naples in recent years, pouring billions into infrastructure projects aimed at revitalizing the city and boosting its economy. But this investment has come at a cost. Many of these projects are located in high-risk areas, where the threat of volcanic activity is greatest. Despite warnings from scientists, the government has continued to promote development in these areas, arguing that the economic benefits outweigh the risks. Critics, however, argue that this is a short-sighted approach that puts lives at risk. The government's response to the recent increase in seismic activity has been similarly controversial. While authorities have issued warnings and advised people to be prepared for an eruption, they have stopped short of ordering evacuations or taking other more drastic measures. Instead, the focus has been on reassuring the public and maintaining a sense of normalcy. This approach has been met with criticism from both scientists and local residents. Many argue that the government is downplaying the threat in order to avoid panic and protect the economy. Others believe that the government is simply not prepared to deal with a disaster of this magnitude and is therefore reluctant to take action. The result is a situation where millions of people are living in a state of uncertainty, unsure of what the future holds. They know that the threat is real, but they don't know when or how the government will respond if and when disaster strikes. But the controversy doesn't end there. The Italian government's approach has also been criticized for its lack of transparency. Many people feel that they are not being given the full picture and that the government is not being honest about the true extent of the danger. This has led to a growing sense of distrust, with some people choosing to take matters into their own hands by preparing for the worst on their own. For example, in the town of Pozzuoli, located near the Phlegraean fields, a group of residents has formed a grassroots organization aimed at raising awareness about the volcanic threat. They have organized community meetings, distributed emergency preparedness guides, and even conducted their own drills. Their goal is to ensure that the people of Pozzuoli are ready for whatever comes, even if the government is not. But not everyone has the resources or the knowledge to take such measures. Many people, particularly those in poorer communities, are left feeling helpless and afraid. They know that they are living in a danger zone, but they don't know what to do or where to turn for help. The Italian government's response to the volcanic threat is a complex and controversial issue, one that reflects the difficult choices that must be made in the face of such a disaster. But the stakes are high, and the consequences of getting it wrong could be catastrophic. This isn't just Italy's problem. A major eruption could have global consequences that would be felt far beyond the borders of Italy. To understand the potential impact, let's take a closer look at some of the ways in which a volcanic eruption in Italy could affect the world. One of the most immediate and significant impacts would be on air travel. When the Eyjafjallajökull volcano in Iceland erupted in 2010, it released a massive ash cloud that spread across Europe, grounding flights and causing travel chaos for millions of people. The disruption lasted for several weeks and had a significant economic impact, costing airlines an estimated $1.7 billion in lost revenue. Now imagine an eruption on the scale of the Phlegraean Fields, or even Vesuvius. The ash cloud from such an eruption could be hundreds of times larger than that of Eyjafjallajökull, with far more severe consequences. Air travel across Europe, and potentially beyond, could be grounded for months, if not longer. The economic impact would be enormous, with losses running into the tens of billions of dollars. But the impact on air travel would be just the beginning. The ash cloud would also block out sunlight, leading to a drop in temperatures and a phenomenon known as volcanic winter. This could have a devastating impact on agriculture, leading to crop failures and food shortages around the world. To understand the potential impact, let's look at a historical example. In 1815, the eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia caused what is known as the Year Without a Summer. The eruption released a massive amount of ash and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, which spread across the globe and blocked out sunlight. Temperatures dropped, crops failed, and food prices soared. The result was widespread famine and social unrest, with millions of people affected. A similar event originating from Italy could have even more severe consequences. With global populations much higher than they were in the 19th century, the impact of food shortages and economic instability would be felt more acutely. The ripple effects could lead to political instability, social unrest, and even conflict as countries scramble to secure food and resources for their populations. But the impact wouldn't stop there. Volcanic eruptions can also trigger tsunamis, especially when they occur near the coast. The collapse of part of a volcano into the sea can displace a large volume of water, generating massive waves that can travel across entire ocean basins. This was the case in 1883 when the eruption of Krakatau in Indonesia caused a series of tsunamis that killed more than 36,000 people. With many of Italy's volcanoes located near the coast, the threat of a tsunami is very real. Such an event could devastate coastal communities, not only in Italy but across the Mediterranean and beyond. The economic and human toll would be enormous, with potentially millions of people affected. The psychological impact of such a disaster would also be significant. The constant threat of another eruption would create a climate of fear and uncertainty, as people wonder if their homes, their lives, and their futures could be wiped out in an instant. This could lead to a decline in mental health, with increased rates of anxiety, depression, and other stress-related conditions. The global response to such a disaster would also be a major challenge. Governments and international organizations would need to coordinate efforts to provide aid, manage the economic impact, and address the long-term consequences of the eruption. This would require a level of cooperation and coordination that has rarely been seen before. In short, a major volcanic eruption in Italy would be a global disaster, with consequences that would be felt far beyond the borders of the country. It's a reminder of the interconnectedness of our world, and the fact that what happens in one part of the globe can have far-reaching implications for us all. The signs are there. The warnings are clear. Italy stands on the brink of disaster, and the world could be next. This isn't just a story about one country, it's a story about the fragility of our planet and the interconnectedness of our global community. The lessons of history are clear. When we fail to heed the warnings, the consequences can be catastrophic. But we are not powerless. By understanding the risks, taking action to prepare, and working together as a global community, we can mitigate the impact of such disasters and protect our future. So, what can you do? First, stay informed. Keep an eye on the latest developments in Italy and around the world, and be aware of the potential risks. Second, be prepared. If you live in an area that could be affected by a volcanic eruption or other natural disaster, make sure you have a plan in place to protect yourself and your family. And finally, support efforts to improve disaster preparedness and response. Whether it's by advocating for better government policies, donating to organizations that provide disaster relief, or simply spreading the word, you can make a difference. If you found this information eye-opening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ChronicleVerse, Stories Unveiled. We'll continue to bring you the stories that matter, the ones that could change your life. Stay informed, stay safe, and remember, we're all in this together.